to the Noracle. I never remember to phrase that sentence correctly. Thank you to the Noracle for that amazing show. You're listening to KBMF LP Butte 102.5 FM on your radio dial, and maybe potentially you're listening on butteamericaradio.org/stream. And maybe potentially you're going to be joining us today on Facebook or on Twitch or on YouTube, because we are live streaming on all 3 platforms this afternoon.
Our Facebook live stream looks different.
It does?
Yeah, there's a chat bar right in the middle of the whole thing.
Huh. Well,
can you see it?
I can.
That's pretty neat.
I put it there so that anybody can see anybody's comments from any platform.
So if somebody was watching
and even if they watch it in the future, they'll be able to see it.
If somebody was watching this on Facebook right now, if they chatted and if they put something, a comment, it shows up right on the video.
That's right.
And it will be there forever?
And it will be there forever, and it will go to Twitch, and it will go to YouTube.
That's exciting.
But we are using a radio platform today. It's a community platform. We're volunteers, but we're grateful to have a couple of paid employees who put together this platform for the 80 of us volunteer DJs to use.
Indeed.
And if you're interested in being a DJ, you can attend a DJ training here at the Carpenters Union Hall in Butte, America. It's usually at the beginning of the month, and if it's not a day that works out for you, you can always call the station. Our phone number is on our website, and talk with our station manager, Clark Grant, about a day that will work for you. We're always interested in getting to know our community, and interested in providing you a place to talk about the things that are important for you to talk about, and to play the music that you love. And so today, we are going to be talking about the HalfTime show. This is Post-Orthodoxy.
Oh, jeez.
It's a show about changing our minds.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, jeez, Rick. What's my tagline, Ben? When people are asking me, I always have to come up with a nice, quick way of telling people what the show is about today. So our show is about the HalfTime show, why Christians are mad about it, and why everybody else is mad that the Christians are mad about it.
Everybody else.
Well,
if you're not mad, you're nobody.
I'm using blanket terms, I understand. Yep. This is what taglines are.
Broad statements.
Sweeping statements. It's true.
Okay, I'm interested in this topic, I guess.
Yeah?
I'm interested to be a pundit.
What's a pundit?
You know, I'm going to look up punditry.
Just because you defined it for me
I
off air earlier.
For you several times.
We still need to talk about it on air.
Everybody knows what everybody
knows what a pundit is. That's not true.
So a pundit is an expert in a particular subject or field who is frequently called on to give opinions about it to the public. So they're an expert, and I think it's important. We could go down the etymological rabbit hole. There's a difference between an expert and an authority.
Right.
So I don't know what it takes to be considered an expert.
Well, I think from how you've been defining it to me,
but
you think of a pundit as a negative term.
Punditry. I'm going to look up punditry.
Yeah, you tend to describe punditry as something negative, I found.
Yeah.
And that definition was not strictly a negative definition.
I should find the Urban Dictionary definition. Yeah, punditry. I was bemoaning earlier, off air, how we have more. The punditry has become sort of partisan catnippery, more than like sort of complex breakdown of complex issues in order to simplify them for the public. I find that the punditry that we find on a lot of our news programs to be a little pithy. And it feels like...
Pithy just means succinct, right? And a little sarcastic?
No.
No, pithy.
Pithy
witty.
means like...
Witty and sarcastic.
Pithy. You don't know what pithy?
I mean, I've only ever read it in context, and I guess I kind of assumed it meant like striking.
Concise and forcefully expressive is one. Concise and forcefully expressive.
So it's going to be a little pushy.
Also containing much pith.
You contain much pith.
Let's look up I want to use the dictionary.
Defining our terms is so important.
We gotta get them defined before we start
We've
talking.
got to get them defined because we've all heard different terms from our grandmas and our aunts and our teachers and our mothers and our fathers and our friends. And everybody's using them differently, and everybody understands them differently. And half the time, people pretend they know what it means when they don't.
Well, I think I was using the word pithy in a word that the dictionary doesn't agree with.
See, isn't that interesting? I think words evolve a lot, and we can have a whole other argument about whether or not the dictionary definitions should evolve along with the colloquial definitions.
Synonym for pithy: concise, terse, succinct, laconic, summary,
laconic,
compendious.
Laconic is like sardonic.
Implies brevity to the point of seeming rude.
Pithy implies brevity to the point of seeming rude.
No, that's laconic. So laconic implies brevity to the point of seeming rude, indifferent, or mysterious. But pithy, I always thought pithy, I thought it was a little more derogatory than I was using it in a more derogatory way than the dictionary was. Jeez.
I did not.
I'm glad I have this dictionary.
This dictionary that is the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark French just said something.
I had to restart my computer because an unknown error occurred.
Oh, that happens.
Yeah, so I wasn't getting any data from anyone. So hang tight, folks. We'll be responding to you shortly. What did Mark French say?
Oh, he said hi.
Oh, hi, Mark
He
French.
said sweet. He's so stoked.
Oh.
We're talking about the Super Bowl halftime show.
Right.
And I'm going to be. I guess maybe I'm not a pundit. I may not be an expert. I guess I'm an expert.
In what?
In mimetic mediation between the fundamentalist mindset and the non-fundamentalist mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I'll call myself
that
an
thing that I
expert
sent you
because it
today?
doesn't require anything.
I sent you something really awesome.
I was working.
From, I think it was from Patheos. That was a quote from maybe Jimmy Carter about fundamentalism.
Oh.
I'm going to have to just remember it now. It was saying fundamentalism, fundamentalists can't have discussions with non-fundamentalists because to enter into a discussion with someone is to imply a sense of equality. Your opinions are just as valid as my opinions, and therefore we can have a conversation about our opinions.
Oh, yeah. And
fundamentalist perspectives, by definition, cannot have conversations with contradictory perspectives because it's admitting maybe their perspective isn't the only correct one. It's especially hard for Christian fundamentalists because we have God. We/they. I use we/they interchangeably since I just moved on.
You're in the borderlands.
I am in the borderlands still.
Yeah.
For sure.
Just when you think you're out.
Because it's not me saying my perspective is the most correct only one. It's that God said it's the correct one.
How convenient.
So if I were to entertain a conversation with you about something that contradicts my Christian beliefs, not only am I entertaining that something could be contradictory to God's way, but it would also be a temptation for me in my faith to have a conversation with you and actually entertain the idea that your opinion would be just your perspectives and your truth could be just as valid as mine.
Some guy somewhere sometimes said that the only true communication is that between equals. Otherwise, you're just preaching. Right? You're extolling. You could be teaching. You could be informing. But the only true communication, there has to be sort of some namaste business going on there. You got to actually consider the other an equal for there ever to be the possibility of true communication.
Right.
So we don't have communication from inside religion to outside religion because of the premise that the people inside the religion have the one true way. Sometimes that seems to be the case. And we don't have communication in politics because the other color, the other side is completely wrong. So therefore, there will not be communication.
So you could be coming from what some people might call a stuck-up perspective, which is that my way is the only correct way, so there's no reason for me to talk to you about your opinion.
They're not looking for new information.
Many Christians are not coming, although people outside of that might think of them as being stuck up, they're not coming from a stuck up perspective, because God has told them, you need to help people think better so they go to heaven.
So they're operating for the premise that they're out there ministering, preaching.
Ministering truth to people who are lost.
And they're not communicating.
But to people on the outside of that, they're just like, why can't you live and let live?
Okay, so I think that's a good setup for the topic of the show. Because this is you having a foot in two worlds, a foot of purity, culture, fundamentalist Christian hoo-ha, to post that.
Right.
And whatever that means, and whatever's possible. I don't think you define yourself post other than that you post that, which I appreciate. You don't have to just jump into another thing. You don't have to have another definition for yourself to explain yourself to people. But
I think I'm acknowledging that I'm still very influenced by the belief system I just left 4 years ago.
So having social media where you have friends and acquaintances and looky-loos from your various worlds
and
that you've
my
lived in.
6 younger siblings and
Right.
my best friends from 5 years old.
So you have all these people looking and talking, and you have communications with them. So now you're experiencing some sort of it's like a culture shock of going from you had a shared perspective with a group of people. Now you don't necessarily share that perspective with that group of people anymore, and yet you want to remain friends with them and friendly to them and available.
Right.
But you're finding it difficult to actually have a conversation that is like communication.
Actual communication.
Because of the premise that you are fallen.
Right.
You have fallen from the path.
Fallen from the faith.
And so therefore, there's no reason to give you equal status, because obviously not. Because you've
at worst, you could say at worst or at best, either way. At worst, I am stubbornly fallen and there's no saving me, and so my perspectives are invalid because I'm not coming from a biblical perspective. At best / at worst, I shouldn't be listened to because I might actually tempt my loved ones away from their promise of heaven.
Right, so it's not just that you're fallen, it's that you're potentially dangerous
to their eternal soul.
So
and I'm saying all of this with love.
That makes communication a little rough.
Yeah, it does.
So you're there with a foot in both worlds. You've got people who are like, yay, women's empowerment. And look, they did a political statement about kids at the border. And isn't it nice that they're using something like the football game to use a stage in the middle to have some social statement?
A massively watched game.
Sure. So there's various ways to look at that. For me, I don't care. I'm not a big fan of the Super Bowl. I saw the HalfTime show and it was fine. I don't really have a strong opinion about it.
It was fine? You don't think it was hot?
Yeah, it was fine. Not my style.
Okay, not your style of dancing.
I can appreciate the work that was put in. I can appreciate what is required to create the image that was projected, and the kind of fitness that is required. I get all that. It's just not mine. I don't have strong opinions about the Super Bowl thing. What I do find interesting is your battle all week long, and trying to keep your foot in both worlds, where some people are like, I think you should get out of my world right now.
I have people on both, if we want to be really reductionist and say there are only two camps, which there are not only two camps on the planet.
It's just for convenience.
But like in the US right now, among mostly white people, there are reductionistly two camps. People who are influenced by Judeo-Christian values as interpreted by modern evangelicals, and people who are not very influenced by those values.
Right.
Now, I say it like that rather than Christians and non-Christians for two reasons. One, I think defining people by what they are not is not a right way to define people. Just saying someone is a non-Christian or an unbeliever.
Well, that's all that matters
is
if
leaving,
you're one.
Well, that's all that matters if you are in the church.
Right.
Is that there are the Christians and there are the not Christians.
All them others.
And it doesn't matter what kind of other they are, because they're not in the club, they're not going to heaven, and they could be dangerous to your faith.
They don't get it, too. They also don't get it.
Who's they?
The folks who haven't found the one true way.
Right. And then I also say people influenced by Judeo-Christian values as interpreted by modern evangelicals versus people who are not influenced by Judeo-Christian values very much, because there are people who say they're Christians in the U.S., yes. And then there are a bunch of people who don't call themselves Christians but are still influenced and affected by Judeo-Christian values.
It's right.
There were a lot of people that I saw protesting the HalfTime show who, when confronted, did not say that they were protesting it because of biblical purity standards. They just thought that it was inappropriate. And they think that that is their opinion that they have just come up with on their own, rather than an opinion that has been pervasive and indoctrinated over a period of time by the modern Christian church in the U.S. And I think it's also a good time to say that we're going to say a lot of things about the church or Christianity, and that we both understand the difference between...
There's a lot of different kinds of Christians.
There are a lot of different kinds of Christians.
A lot of different churches.
And there's a big difference between institutionalized religion and or TV preachers.
Incidental identity. Like, I'm Christian because I have to pick a box.
It's different than individual people who maybe actually are fostering a relationship with God in their own way.
You know, we've only got 2 hours in this entire program, and I'm already feeling like, with the rabbit holes we've gone down on occasion in the last week.
This was a very rabbit hole conversation.
2 hours, I think we need to try to get her done in 2 hours to a point where, what's the point of this discussion? It's not whether J-Lo looks good at 50, it's not whether people on a stripper pole is going to seriously damage a 12-year-old boy.
No.
I don't think that's really the thing. It's really about the inability. This is what I'm coming to.
Okay.
And then this is what I would like to this is my focus, is that the folks that are upset live in a tunnel reality. This is my perspective. They live in a tunnel reality where the premise is sexuality is scandalous. No matter what, it's just scandalous. You just keep that at home. You don't talk about it. You have a body, but let's pretend you don't.
Or it's private and holy.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever.
Not everybody says scandalous.
Well, so I'm being super general.
Right.
Generalized.
Disclaimer.
We've only got 2 hours. So I'm willing to qualify any of this stuff if anybody in the listening audience has questions.
Or is horribly offended.
Or is, well, which is possible.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
So there are people who are upset about the HalfTime show. There are other people who are not upset about the HalfTime show and find it to be inspiring or a positive thing. And the gulf in between, I don't think is bridgeable. I don't think it's bridgeable. So
really?
I don't think so. Not if
then what is the point?
Well, that's the point.
Okay.
Is that if you have people who are of a religious bent that it doesn't allow for true communication because of the other people are not on your level according to their perspective, they haven't got the one true thing.
Okay.
If there will never be communication, true communication, then I don't know how you can resolve these two perspectives. So I see that they've been clashing. You're a middle ground person, so you have both worlds clashing on your timeline. People getting upset. People who never had the fundamentalist Christian trip, totally mind-boggled by people who are coming from that trip.
And also offended when I don't shut down the Christians.
So we've become, because of our polarized nature, political nature, especially, it's trickled down, and I think it comes from the fundamentalist Christian stream in this country, which is the bipolar thing. It's us and them, yes and no. There's no gray area, there's no spectrum, there's just the in crowd and everybody else who's going to hell. That thing I think is why our political spectrum is so polarized. And so I'm interested in this dialogue I think we should be communicating better than we are. And I think it is possible as humans.
Yeah.
why are we not doing it? That is the question that I'm interested in. And this Super Bowl thing is a great platform for people from various worlds to not understand each other. It's the perfect opportunity for no communication to occur.
I'm angry about this, I'm angry about that, and we can't change because, and this is the thing I think a lot of people who are arguing don't realize, they're coming from completely different starting points. And until you get to the moment where you realize you're coming from completely different starting points, you're gonna say things in English to each other that you think you both ought to understand and get along with, but it's not gonna work because your English is being interpreted through two completely different pathways.
Right, so I'm gonna say if you're a fundamentalist Christian, I'll narrow it down to just say Frank. Frank is a fundamentalist Christian and has hang-ups around sex. From a non-Christian perspective, has hang-ups around sexuality. In that sort of Christian way that they do.
So people who are outside the church are kind of like, what's Frank's problem?
Yeah, what's your deal? And so it can go from, oh, that's evil and it's tempting my son to have evil thoughts, or that's degrading to women. And that's funny coming from a fundamentalist Christian perspective because they treat women like property according to the book. So I find I see the mind-boggling part for somebody who has never been raised in that tight,
completely ultimatum-based environment,
pithy perspective. And so I understand people who've never been raised with that looking and going, what is their deal and why can't they understand what I'm saying to them? So there's a wall, and I think the only aha moment can come from somebody who has a more nuanced perspective or a non-fundamentalist perspective. They're the ones, unfortunately, for you guys that are that. The responsibility is on your shoulders to understand why you're not communicating with this other sect, because they have a fairly simple perspective.
I see.
So what happens is people who are supposed to be more evolved, on the left, very progressive, are like spanking children for being bad verbally. That's what they're doing in all these online comments.
Which is a perspective that I'm sure the people you're calling children would find rather offensive.
Completely offensive. So I'm in the middle.
Right.
I'm not identified with either or. Right. So this is what I see from 30 years of having a foot in two worlds.
Of course.
Or three worlds, or four worlds. Like the frustration over not being able to communicate is something that can be cured, I think.
Okay.
If you understand, and this is where it gets really tricky, that because this fundamentalist perspective does not have nuance, it is up to the people who do have nuance to appreciate the limited nature of that perspective.
Okay.
And I look at it like it's an abuse of power, intellectual power, if you're smart. If you're smart and you're an evolved person, and let's say you're in high school and you know geometry and you see a fourth grader who's struggling with multiplication and you make fun of them.
Right.
That is an abuse of power. That's you saying, well, yeah, you have more years.
It's simple, stupid.
Right. So that's what happens. That's what I see with a lot of progressively minded folks, is that they like to make fun of people who don't have the capacity for nuance that they do, which to me is an abuse of power.
That maybe progressively minded folks
they need to grow up.
Were never taught compassion.
Well,
they never saw compassion being modeled.
Or not modeled to somebody who they perceive as the enemy.
Right. It's hard. This is a parenting problem, to put it really simply. Sorry, as the parent, it's your job to not smack your kid when they smack you.
So
if your kid smacks you, don't smack them back because they're a kid and they're learning, and it's your job to teach them what the right way to do it is.
So I think our political divide is religious in nature, and it's been my perspective for a long time that the burden is on the more evolved human.
Okay.
To have compassion for people who do not have, and I'm going to say it, who do not have or do not exercise the capacity for multiple perspectives.
What do you mean by multiple perspectives?
So I can look at the world through the Hindu worldview, and I can see a world like that. I can also look at the world through a Soka Gakkai international Buddhist perspective and see the world from that point of view.
And understand that that point of view is a valid point of view.
It has value.
It has value.
I can look at the world through the fundamentalist Christian perspective and understand that perspective. I can look at the perspective through some psychedelic avatars perspective and see that perspective. So I like to use different maps, right? That's the way I look at it. So you can use a topographical map, you can use a hydrology map, you can use a geomagnetic map, you can do a sky map, you can do a mineral map. It's all the same place, but it's just the lens through which you're looking, right? And if you're in a fundamental perspective, I don't think that's bad or wrong. I think it's a very effective perspective to have. It's the lack of nuance.
What's a way that we could say that positively?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Focus?
I'm trying to do it. Well, I like to use the example. They're good soldiers. They're good friends. Like a fundamentalist-minded person, if you are their friend and you do something totally egregious in a bar and somebody starts to beat you up, they will defend you because you're their friend.
Right.
I am not always willing to jump in if my friend has been a jerk and he's getting his comeuppance. I'm not necessarily going to defend him.
Right. You're not just going to defend him because he's your friend and that's what bros do.
So if I'm going to be in a bar...
Some people would say that's a flaw.
Some people would say that.
I'm not saying that that's a flaw.
Yeah.
I just know lots of people who stand up for people they shouldn't stand up for because loyalty.
I'm all for jumping in the middle and trying to broker a deal.
Right.
But I'm not going to defend somebody who's wrong.
Who's actually,
Who's incorrect.
Right.
However, people who are more loyal in their perspective, and that comes from being loyal to the church, loyal to a party, loyal to your town's football team, whatever. That kind of loyalty is so easy to negotiate the world. It expedites. And if you're somebody who doesn't have to deal with a lot of nuance, you just want to get things done.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to, there's not a lot of prevarication. You don't have to like worry about all the possibilities. You just say, they're on my team, they're not on my team.
Right. And
that's good, that's bad.
It's nice to have those people on your team.
That's the kind of, and I think that's a function in the world, like the body parts, like the thumb is different than the brain, but they all have their parts, right? So
their functions.
Their functions, those parts serve functions. And I feel like if we're going to use the body of humanity as a metaphor, we all have, some people are nervy, some people are butts, you know. Some people are the digestive tract and they break things down.
So when you started this awesome descriptive rant, you were trying to come up with what you think our goal is today.
So I'm telling you,
and I'll give my side.
I'm telling you the math that I'm going for.
Okay.
And that is, I think it's incumbent upon people who consider themselves smarter than, say, a Trump supporter. There's a lot of people like, they're all idiots because they support Trump. How can an idiot support Trump?
Right.
So if you think you're smarter than a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist political perspective, if you think you're smarter than that, then I think it's incumbent upon you to have compassion for people who don't have your smarts. That's the tunnel that I'm working through.
I agree with that baseline.
So if we're going to have a discussion about the Super Bowl, and whether it's right or wrong, I don't think that's ever going to get resolved because it doesn't need to. But I think there's this itch that we like to scratch, which is like, you're wrong, and now I'm going to show you how wrong you are.
Right.
That's
especially when,
And there are people who are never going to see how wrong they are.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote.
You have to remember we're also streaming on just audio, and some people can't see our air quotes.
I said it with air quotes.
Right.
In the way I said it. You didn't need my hands.
I believe you.
So anyway, that's my perspective. And so you've been trying to mediate between a fundamentalist perspective and a non-fundamentalist perspective. A judgmental perspective, and I don't know, I think they were both judgmental, frankly. And so...
So interesting.
Yeah. For me, I'm interested in, can there be communication? And if not, maybe we should admit that.
Yeah.
Rather than just consider like again, the algebra person is not going to have an algebra conversation with somebody who's struggling with you should just you should accept that.
Okay, so
you have to take a high road at some point.
Let me speak from the perspective of the liberal feminist.
Right. By the way, yes.
Who feels like Christians saying that the halftime show was inappropriate and sinful is attacking her. She feels attacked. The liberal feminist feels that Christians are coming into her yard and telling her what to do with her body, and it's not their right.
Even though she wasn't dancing on stage, just that it's an attack on women.
An attack on women, on personal freedom.
Right.
These people are saying their opinions in the world that I have to live in. Someone might listen to them. And so you're saying that the liberal feminist shouldn't say anything to...
I argue with people who are never going to agree with me all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. I do try to not be mean. I try to make a point not to be mean. Sometimes I am mean.
Compassion.
But I do like to have the dialogue with people who I don't really have any hope of them ever coming around to my point of view. Because for me, it's like a martial art. It's like people are going to punch you and you try to block the punch. It's just that exercise of how do you...
Block the punch without fighting back?
Without fighting back, right. Like a Tai Chi.
Well, but then to be meta for a moment, if we don't ever fight back, how are perspectives that... speaking from the Christian perspective and from the liberal perspective, to use vague terms, like how are we ever going to combat what we feel are dangerous viewpoints if we can't fight back against people saying things that we think are dangerous? Because people who are Christians think that sexual autonomy and women freedom is dangerous and causes sexual predators and causes children to be sick.
That's an easy question.
Okay.
I would say, what is the premise? Are you trying to actually win hearts and minds and communicate something, or are you just out there chanting team slogans?
And that works for both sides because because the liberal feminist or whoever it is also beholden to try, like, what you're basically saying is, unless you're trying to be helpful to the person who has a different perspective from you, then you're just having a bunch of hot air.
It feels good to yell at people, I guess. It feels good to tell people how wrong they are.
Especially if you feel like you've been harmed by people with that perspective in the past.
Right, it gets really soupy. So, yeah, I don't think it's...
Take some of your own back.
Yeah. So it feels good. We've become very tribal. We're a very tribal nation. We're a gangster nation. And so we like to fight, we like to rumble, we like to cheer for our team. I mean, our football, we have what other country has a sport where they just brutalize each other? We love all that stuff. We love sort of the gladiator stuff. We like to see people fight and we like to see people bleed. We do, as a culture, generally speaking. So when it comes to dialogue, have you seen videos of Tai Chi masters who some jerk is going to try to fight them and effortlessly they thwart every move.
Right, without fighting back.
And they exhaust the opponent.
Right.
And then that opponent has to realize at some point that person has skills I can't tangle with. And that's kind of like the dream of trying to do that intellectually.
I see, yeah. To be an
I'm always willing to have the conversation. I want to have the conversation. I don't necessarily think we're going to actually communicate. We can converse without communicating. Like if somebody's looking at me like I'm the other, maybe I'm a libtard or a communist or whatever you want to call me, they're not open to my perspective if they're calling me.
Because it's a bad perspective.
Right. So they're just throwing punches.
Right.
And then I try to do what I can to deflect those punches while remaining calm and hopefully wear them out. That's always the goal, just to wear out the other people.
Interesting.
And then eventually, because people did that to me, I found myself like, oh yeah, well, I'll show you. And then realizing that they had something that I didn't understand because they weren't offended by the thing I thought would offend them.
You were trying to offend them and they didn't
offend them.
So that's the goal, is don't let them see you sweat.
Kinda.
Kinda?
So, we've gotten hyper partisan, and I think the only way to get out of that is what's the premise of what are you doing? Are you out there just chanting for the team slogan? Or are you actually trying to change our minds? Are you trying to make some policy?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you out there just chanting for the home team?
Right.
And I see a lot of Facebook stuff is just people chanting for the home team, representing their perspective, not looking to change it.
Rob McLean likes my platinum hair.
Of course.
We have a million comments that I want to be.
Get in there.
I want to be honorable to our audience.
Let's get in there.
Because we've asked people to participate, and they are participating. For those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about the halftime show, why Christians are mad about it, and why other people are mad that the Christians are mad. It's a tangly subject, and Dark has made the opening statement in many words that we probably won't be able to agree.
No.
Christians and people who are not influenced by Judeo-Christianity will probably not be able to agree. And
understand.
I have to agree with you.
Yeah.
Because I was in a fundamentalist evangelical Christian perspective, Reformed evangelical, for 27 years. And it is an extremely encased ultimatum. I don't want to say circular reasoning, but there's an answer for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no way out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no both and.
Right. I think it's really relieving to give up sometimes and to say, we're not going to communicate. Okay, that takes such.
Yeah.
And then if we're not going to communicate, then why are you talking? And what is your motivation? I think that's really what I was trying to say in all those words.
Well,
why are you communicating with people?
My motivation is to be helpful. The premise of my post-Orthodoxy theorem, is that everybody is born into certain reality bubbles, and at some point you experience some reasonable doubt in the form of an inquisitive friend, or a movie that your mom never let you watch, or maybe a conversation in college that puts a little tiny crack in the bubble that seemed like all of reality, and you realize there is more reality outside of your bubble of all of reality. And I think these sorts of conversations, I really do want to continue to dance in the borderland.
Yeah.
I live in the borderland in my mind all the time, between the Reformed evangelical principles I was raised with and the things that I'm learning about the rest of reality beyond Reformed evangelical principles.
There's something beyond that?
I work really hard not to use exclusionary language or negative language or contrasting language. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And I want to work in the borderlands because I know so many people who have stepped outside of the Christian bubble.
Yeah.
And found other reality beyond that reality bubble. And I would be honored to be the person that introduced the tiny spark of reasonable doubt that enabled them to move beyond that bubble and live a broader, freer life.
And that's a point, this is something that came up in the dialogue over the Super Bowl thing that I think is really important. I want to get it out now. Okay. Is that, oh geez, I forgot it already.
Oh no, Joey Fortin.
Yeah, he used to do stand-up comedy.
Fortin, I'm trying to say
he's in
French.
Vegas.
Fortin. Anyway, on to our comments. We'll do some comments and then we'll dig back into it.
There's something that was so important. It was the crux of everything. Yeah, give me some comments.
Let's see. There's some chatty chat. Kevin Olson says, if someone is strong in their faith, they shouldn't be concerned about temptation. Did you think of it? If you think of it, just bust in.
Well, I was reading Mark French's comment. He said, are smart people, do smart people want to be right, or do they want to be effective? And that's the thing, that's the crux of the matter. Like what was happening with you on your timeline, where you had people who were angry, this thing that somebody called me out on when I was 21.
I think it depends on your definition of smart.
It depends on your definition of smart. Like when I was a fundamentalist Christian and I wasn't, suddenly I wanted to turn on the people who were still trapped, because I felt so dumb once I got out.
That you wanted to be mad at the people that raised you that way?
I got out and I'm like, look, I'm a moron, and I got out of that perspective. Like the only reason, like you shouldn't be in that perspective anymore. So it was like a very aggressive trying to get people out of a closed mindset, because I thought that if I can get out, then anybody can get out. And it's nice out here.
Because you thought of yourself as dumb.
I I didn't see myself as any extraordinary genius. And I managed to go from a black and white perspective to a spectrum perspective. And I'm like, wow, we should all be doing this. I didn't know it was possible.
Right.
And so when I found out it was possible, I found myself being really snide and condescending to people who were still there. And that's kind of like it's not like an intellectual version of the nouveau riche. Like, you have money and you want to act like you have money. So, like, people were mean to me when I didn't know stuff, but what got me out, this is the point that I wanted to say, what got me out of my perspective wasn't because people said, you think that way? Well, you're a total moron.
Right.
It was people who said, you seem kind of smart. How do you come to that perspective? And I had to answer that question for myself because somebody took the time and had the compassion to help me change my mind rather than judging me for not being as smart as them, or being as evolved as them, or being as nuanced as them. That's the evolved perspective, is that you have compassion for people who don't have the things that you have. And that could be money, that could be muscle, that could be cognitive ability. And if somebody is like a dumb Trump supporter and you want to ridicule them, that's the same thing as being like a high school kid pounding on a first grader. It's an abuse of power, frankly. And if you're going to be the big guy, if you're going to be the smart person, if you're going to be the compassionate one, if you're going to be the evolved one, you got to look at who you're beating up on.
Right.
There's this perspective that the government is huge, the opposition is huge, that the Republicans are this big, scary monster. They're not.
They're just people.
They're just folks. The government isn't an entity, it's all our neighbors in the government. It's not some giant monster. We tend to, like, the left has this fetish of opposing this big evil thing called the conservatives. And that makes them impotent because they create the monster rather than having compassion for maybe a perspective that isn't as progressive as theirs. Instead, they battle a perspective that's not as progressive as theirs. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And meanwhile, most conservatives are not worried about battling the Democrats because they're completely confident in their position because God gave it to them.
Because God gave it to them, and those guys are weak.
Right.
Those liberal retards are just snowflakes, and they're weak, and they're not effective because they have all this nuance. They can't make a choice of yes and no, black and white. That perspective, I can totally see that.
Joe Pruden says, bullying a Trump supporter is like picking on a first grader. Care to rephrase that?
No. I don't. I would like
Are you saying Trump supporters are like first graders? Because that's what that statement sounds like.
I think that if you're supporting Trump, I would like to hear the reasons why you're supporting Trump. There's a lot of nuance.
Not this show.
It's not this show.
Not this episode.
So I can understand how people would take umbrage at that statement.
Yeah.
I would say I don't think that if you are supporting Donald Trump as the president of the United States, and I'm just going to make some big, fat, bold statements. If you're supporting the president of the United States, my guess is that you are a misanthrope who's looking forward to everything burning down, which segues into fundamentalist Christians who are looking forward to everything burning down.
Right. So Jesus will come back.
So Jesus will come back. I think if you're supporting Trump, there is a mindset behind that has value, but is not nuanced. And I think that Trump has done a wonderful thing of us becoming aware of our system and how it works. Suddenly people who didn't give a damn care now. But he didn't do that on purpose. I'm not giving him any credit for that. I'm just saying So when I say yes, people making fun of Trump supporters are making fun of a non-nuanced perspective. And by saying that, it makes me look like a jerk.
Yeah, and it's a very sticky place to be, unfortunately. I think, and funnily enough, knowing Joe and his semi-conservative beliefs from our previous conversations, I could imagine that he would also, or many people like him, would also make fun of you for trying to be really nuanced and nice to everybody.
Yeah.
Because a very strong value of conservatives is like you don't need to be nice to everybody. The liberal snowflakes are always just trying to be politically correct
Well, the
and say
corrupters,
things
the liberal
nice.
snowflakes are corrupting the right way.
They're just trying to
God's way, whatever.
be politically correct, and it's like, why can't I just say what I think? And so Dark said what he thought, and Joe was offended.
No, I'm going to offend
And I think
people.
it's really understandable because
I will also say that's my perspective. This is all my perspective.
right.
And I'm willing to change my mind if you can show me that Trump is some brilliant strategist that has come to
that's
office.
where QAnon comes in, right?
Right. Has come to office with some sort of mission from God. If you can argue that with me, I'm totally open to listening.
We will have all manner of conversations with all manner of people. It's just hard to fit it all into a 2-hour episode.
But I think Trump, I'm working, and I'll just clarify the whole thing. I'm working from the perspective that Trump is a symptom of a broken system.
Mm-hmm.
We have a broken political system. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. That's why we have Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's that simple. We can go into politics later. Right now, I think we're segueing into the difference, right? Like, I don't think Joe and I are going to necessarily agree on everything. I think as long as I cannot be a jerk and he cannot be a jerk, we can continue to grow as friends and learn things about each other's perspective.
As neighbors. I like the word neighbors because not everybody is friends, but we are all neighbors.
As cohabitators of the planet.
Yeah.
Like, I'm open. Like, Joe gets, like, I see a lot of, like, directness in his comments, and I see the perspective that they're coming from. And sometimes I take offense and I get snarky, but that's the problem with the chatting. That's the problem with the little, like, 17 words thing. You don't get to see conversation, you don't get to see the emotions. So, like, I will say to Joe, like, I'm glad that he tunes into this show because he's the kind of guy that I actually want to communicate with this program. And when I'm being a jerk, I want to be called out for being a jerk, which at some point we should go from the mailbag. We had a New York Times columnist last week who listened to our show, who gave some feedback about something that I said. I'd like to correct that record maybe at the top of the hour, after we come back from the top of the hour. But right now, we'll stay on track.
That's true, we did. We had a show last week where you went on a rant, and somebody was listening and was like, I think you maybe need to include this in your perspective.
And so I'd like to amend my perspective because they show me a different perspective, and I would like to
It's a delicious feeling to be truly called out in a way that you can learn and grow. When learning and growing is not scary, it feels really good for someone to say, hey, I think this would be a healthy way of thinking. You're like, oh my gosh, you're right.
If I had last week's show to do over again, I would have said some things differently, and somebody showed me how to do that. Thank you, New York Times columnist.
We only have 2 hours. It's already been 50 minutes, and we haven't addressed any of our comments from the first hour. This is going to be hard because our hope is that eventually we'll have even more people participating. How do we stay productive, stay on track with the conversation, and also honor our audience who we've invited here to talk to us today?
I think we start the show with a couple of questions. If you want to comment, and then we can stay on track because you and I will go down so many rabbit holes.
Oh, we'll just rabbit hole all day long.
Okay.
This is
so
why
let's take some questions.
We're gonna start doing Post-Orthodoxy sidecars during the week, which will be long rambling conversations where we just go down all the rabbit holes.
we're not using the community airwaves here for 2 hours. We can just do it on our own time.
Right. We have to folks that are tuning in, we have from a variety of places here. So Kevin Olson commented a lot, Mark French commented a lot, Joe Pruden is participating.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks,
Mark. And Joey Fortin says it's not a mission from God, it's strictly business. And
what part?
The church. This is I have to say, having been a person from church, we didn't go out and put tracts into Budweiser crates to raise business for the church. The church is oftentimes led by a lot of people who may be in it for the business. There are Judeo-Christian principles being used in politics to manipulate citizens for the sake of business, but the individual citizens who are individual church members are not fiscally benefiting from being Christians. So that's all I'm going to go in there for that one, just because this is a conversation about the HalfTime show and human sexuality, not about what's that one guy with the fluffy hair on TV who?
Donald Trump?
No, the church leader.
Oh,
The pastor, the one like major televangelist pastor, Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen.
It's not about all Christians are not Joel Osteen.
Right.
In fact, there are very few people like that. But unfortunately, those are the people that are in power, which is why people outside the church think that's what all Christians are like. It's like, it's just money. It's like, it's not.
At the top of the hour, I'll address the thing from last week, and I'll also address the thing that Joe Pruden just said here. But are there any other comments that are related to the original premise that we've strayed from?
Thanks, Joey. Thanks for tuning in. Peace out, Dark and Ainsley. We appreciate you.
We haven't touched on sexuality yet.
I know. We haven't even gotten into the juicy bits.
Right.
LOL. So let's see. Julian Assange is pretty accurate right now, Mark says. Ruling ideology right now, and maybe Julian Assange is just speaking about the West. We have to be sure to clarify there's a whole other part of the planet that's not belabored by Judeo-Christian problems.
Several others, yes.
Large part of the planet. Julian Assange is actually pretty accurate right now. Ruling ideology right now is really only Christian fascist, radical Islam, and Silicon Valley technology. What do you think about that? If we say in the U.S., the ruling ideologies are Christian fascism, radical Islam, and Silicon Valley technocracy. And I want to say, much like the president is not the citizens, or the senators are not the citizens, the parties are not the citizens, so people acting out Christian fascism things and people acting out radical Islamic things are not every single Christian or every single Muslim.
Of course.
But I do see, I don't really know enough about the word fascist to ascribe to it, but I do see Judeo-Christian principles affecting how people get health care, and affecting how people's children are taken care of at school, and affecting how people get food when they're hungry. And I feel like those principles are coming from a twisted place and not a truly biblical place.
Right. Well, that's the irony. There's a lot of irony involved here, because a lot of the people who are using the big G as their front, saying, "Hey, I'm with Big G," and all this stuff. It's easy to call yourself a Christian, but you don't have to like pass a test or anything.
Right. And for people like my friend who I was debating, I mean, I wasn't debating her, but I posted an article about the Super Bowl. She is a much more progressed and educated feminist than I am.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very new to female empowerment or body autonomy. And she felt very offended by the perspective of the article, which I felt was kind of in the borderlands between Christian perspectives and non-Christian perspectives. And then some of my Christian friends jumped on there and were talking about how they felt like the article was wrong because it's in the borderlands between Christian perspectives and non-Christian perspectives. And there are a lot of people that live in these borderlands. They're not ascribing to biblical standards anymore, but they still don't quite understand how to do something different. And those are oftentimes the people that I want to nurture and provide information to, because I'm still there and I found some pathways, and I think those pathways can be helpful to people. But my friend was... Anyway, I forgot my train of thought.
I know your friend was angry because she was like, "You guys are being idiots, and you're idiots in my world, and you're making my life terrible because you're an idiot in my world. And how come Ainsley
didn't
are
stop
letting
them?
These idiots be idiots?" And the perspective for me is, well, it's difficult for me to come up with metaphors that don't offend one side or the other side. If we're looking at nuanced to non-nuanced perspective, that's probably the kindest way I can put it.
Nuanced to non-nuanced. Right. Yeah, I think it's important to point out, all of us would acknowledge on the planet in any given day, you are good at something and somebody else is not as good at that thing as you are.
Sure.
In any given day, you're going to see somebody who's really good at something that you are not good at.
Yeah.
And nuanced thinking is a skill, and it's also something that certain brains are built to do differently than other brains.
Right.
But it can be learned. And some people think in nuanced ways and some people don't. Let's talk about the definition of nuance real quick.
Well, I like the thing that you always say, which is like when you're in a fundamentalist perspective, you want to know who's in charge and what the rules are.
Who's in charge and what are the rules? How do I feel safe? Kevin Olson says, charlatans can easily appear honest and straightforward. It's called sleight of hand. And I'm really curious if he's calling my Christian friends charlatans. I'm curious of who, I agree with what you're saying, that's what a charlatan is, but who are you calling charlatans in this particular conversation? Joe Pruden kept bringing up that the Super Bowl is a show that is broadcast into everyone's living rooms. Everybody knows it's going into everyone's living rooms. It should be G-rated because kids are watching it.
Okay, so we can just do the Bill Hicks joke right now.
Okay.
So people were calling this soft porn or pornography. My kids should not have been exposed to this soft porn or this pornography. The Supreme Court of the United States ruled that the definition of pornography is causes sexual thought with no artistic merit.
Definition.
So if you have a nude art piece and there's artistic merit to it, that's not pornography. If you have a movie that is a cinematic piece of art and there's nudity in it, that's not pornography, that is art.
Definition-wise.
Definition-wise. So, and then Bill Hicks goes on of like, okay, causes sexual thought, no artistic merit. And then he says, sounds like every commercial on television.
Yeah.
I would not call that pornography. That's dance. That is an art form. And it's singing. That's an art form. And that's within the field. To call it pornography is to not recognize the artistic merit of what was going on.
So definition-wise, that's all well and good. But 75% of the country still identifies themselves as Christians. And even more people than that are affected by Judeo-Christian values of human sexuality, human autonomy, or supremacy on the planet.
Yeah.
And whether or not, what are bodies for? What is sacred?
So nuance is a subtle difference in or shade of meaning, expression, and sound. So somebody saw the ropes in her hands and said, aha, sexual bondage. Somebody else was saying, no, we're talking about perhaps the bondage of economics or culture or whatever you don't know what she was saying, right? And if you have some nuance, you could say,
understand it could mean different things.
The obvious thing might be this, but that's what art does, is it makes you think about different things. So maybe the kids in cages, maybe they were aliens, maybe they were fruits dropped from trees in cages, maybe they are the immigrant children dying in cages at the border. It begs the question. And that's what nuance, when you have a nuanced mind, you can not just jump at the first thing your brain says and say that's what it is. You say, well, it could be this, could be that, and then you learn and you grow, and then you think about the thing. The folks that are having a problem are not thinking about the thing. They're just saying, that turns me on, and so it's tempting my children, and that's evil. And like, that's just strictly modern U.S. Judeo-Christian influenced purity culture business. Because there's other cultures where you can have nudity on television and nobody cares because it's not shocking, because it hasn't been repressed. When you have a country as repressed as we are, people are always looking for ways to break that repression, and it makes it more titillating than it should be. If it wasn't, up on the cookie jar, you think about the thing you can't have. We're so repressed, we can't have freedom of expression, we can't own our sexuality, or our physicality even, often. And so when somebody else does it, it's an affront to you because they're exercising a right that you feel like you don't have because you're obeying the rules or whatever. It's very cultural. It's not absolute. People are treating it like it's an absolute thing because of the Christian perspective.
Christianity is absolutism.
That's very much local American repressed culture. That's my opinion.
If folks are just now tuning in, you're listening to KVMF LP Butte 102.5 FM, or maybe butteamericaradio.org/stream, or maybe you're one of our listeners on Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube this afternoon. We're doing our best to talk about our subject and also interact with comments from our audience. We are talking about the halftime show, why people are mad about it, and why other people are mad that those people are mad about the halftime show. It's not necessarily going to get resolved, but I think any efforts we can all make to understand each other a little bit better are valuable efforts.
Yeah, I'm working from the perspective that it's not going to get resolved, and I think it's worth acknowledging that.
Yeah. I have to play an underwriter real quick.
Yeah, it's top of the hour.
Gallery, located on Main Street in Uptown Butte, just across from the Pekin Noodle Parlor. The Butte Frame Shop offers framing and matting services for holidays, works of art, and more. Reach them by phone at 782-7710.
And we're back. I think we're probably just gonna roll right through today.
Yeah.
And not play a song at the top of the hour. Although if you would be thinking of a great song for us to play at the end of our show, that'd be awesome. I did not have time this afternoon.
I can figure something.
So I'd like to take a minute and maybe speak about my understanding of the Judeo-Christian perspective, because I see two camps online in this week of research about the halftime show and everybody's responses to it. I see people who are saying that's gross, that's inappropriate, I had to turn it off, what were they thinking? And then I see people saying, why do you hate women? And there's kind of no in between. And for people who have some body autonomy and are maybe currently living a sex positive lifestyle, they see Christians saying the halftime show is gross and inappropriate and are shocked and don't understand and think that those people hate women or hate bodies or hate sexuality, those sorts of things. You brought up a good point a couple minutes ago that many Christians have come to associate their own sexuality and arousal with disgust.
Yes.
Because they cannot enjoy being aroused or enjoy something that's sexy. They have to say that that's wrong because the current modern U.S. interpretation of what is biblically correct as far as human sexuality goes is that
in the cult that you were raised in, which is pretty widespread.
Yeah.
Okay.
You say cult, people are going to think it's like 150 people. It's like thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
And that was just the most extreme version.
And what's the version? What's that version of
Reformed
sexuality?
It is that
how should we deal with it?
Marriage is supposed to be between one man and one woman. You're not supposed to do or say or think or feel anything sexual until you are married, and then it is only supposed to be with that person until you die.
That's really weird.
And anything that you experience or participate in outside of that marriage with that person is sinful and will damage your eternal soul as well as harm your marriage.
Okay, so that's pretty black and white cut.
Extremely black and white. Some Christian churches in the U.S. have expanded to accept partnerships between not a man and a woman. Some churches have expanded to accept monogamous committed partnerships between women and women or men and men.
Oh, nice.
Very few churches that I know of have come to a body positive or bodily autonomy or sex positive understanding of human sexuality before marriage or outside of marriage. Everybody's still a little kind of like, oh, well, when are you getting married? Like, how long have you been living together? And so to watch the halftime show is to experience pleasure because it was awesome.
Something came into you're confronted with something that is sexy.
There are some humans on the planet who would not find the halftime show sexy, that's a kind of human, but most people, I'm just saying, like, there are people that don't think that there are people who don't know, there are folks out there who would not have found that kind of dancing sexy.
To me, that was totally athletic.
Yeah.
To me, it wasn't super sexy. Okay. It was like athletic.
We were also watching it on like a wrinkly projector screen. So that was a little hard.
Oh yeah, that was like a funhouse mirror watching.
Yeah,
But for me, it's not like that is a performance. I'm not repressed, so I'm not like, oh my god, I've seen some boobies.
When I was a child, when I wanted to go swimming with my friends, it always had to be in a group. If there were going to be boys present, there had to be parents present.
Okay.
Even if there were lots of boys and girls going to the lake, there had to be parents present if there were going to be boys.
Right.
And I had to wear a full unitard swimsuit and shorts that went down almost to my knee and a t-shirt.
Phew. Yeah.
In like 2005. This was not that long ago. There are a lot of people, there are websites and companies dedicated to modest swimwear.
So I get like people saying, let's not sexualize our children, because I think that's problematic when you put them up, dress them up like strippers and you put them in talent shows and stuff. Like that's kind of a little, I'm not down with that whole thing.
Kiddie talent shows gross me out.
It's kind of gross. On the other hand, when you go the other way and you put a burqa, basically a burqa on them, on the kids, what you're doing is you're delaying and intensifying curiosity and exploration.
Which is going to happen.
Which is like, if you meet your one true love and you've never had sex and you get married and it's the best thing ever, I'm sure that's really magical.
Right? Maybe. And you're also good at communicating, and you guys aren't embarrassed that neither of you knows what you're doing.
And you just figure it all out magically.
And you suddenly know where to go when you have questions.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if there's some people who might have pulled that off. I don't know. I had a lot of trial and error in my relationship world.
I think that there are a lot of people in longevity relationships who feel like they pulled it off because they have never sat down and had an honest thought with themselves about whether or not they're sexually happy. Like, well, we made it work. We've been married for 50 years.
Well, if you repress it long enough, it does go away.
Oh, gosh. So, I'm not quite sure who I'm speaking to here. It's a little hard because I do want to speak to everybody. And you can't always do that effectively in 2 hours or ever.
So, what do you hope to accomplish with this show? With this discussion between the two realms? What would you hope to accomplish with this?
I can't say that it's two sides to the same coin because it's not two sides to the same coin. A lot of people, I've been trying to think of an analogy. So there's the table of, what's that tree? The biological tree. They say if we all evolved from the same protozoa, and then everybody can visualize that tree. We've all seen it in our science books. Yeah. It's like the kingdom, the animal kingdom, right? So there's the version where there's just one stem at the bottom, and then branches and branches and branches and branches and branches.
Right.
A Judeo-Christian influenced person talking about sexuality, and a person talking about sexuality who's been liberated from Judeo-Christian principles, or never had it, are coming from two completely different initiating points.
Right.
It's not the same animal kingdom talking to each other. It's two completely different animal kingdoms in the way they think, in the way they use words, and the way that they interpret everything.
Meaning is different.
Meaning is completely different. Values are completely different. So my two goals would be to help to introduce potentially some reasonable doubt to my friends who are liberated from Judeo-Christian body repression, that people laboring under those Judeo-Christian principles don't hate women. Citizens, civilians, church members, everyday folks who are afraid of what their 12-year-old boy thinks when he sees the HalfTime show are operating out of love. They are operating out of fear-based love and love-based fear given to them by the one true God, that it is their job to protect their son from sin so that he will grow up to be a good husband and then someday go to heaven. So that's the picture I want to paint.
I really loved reading those comments of people like, my 14-year-old boy saw it and said it made him feel uncomfortable. I'm like,
I said it was gross.
Oh, you're
so blind.
You are living in such a bubble. Like,
if your 14-year-old son said that was gross, he's either gay or he's lying to you.
Yes.
And if he was gay, he probably wouldn't say it was gross.
Or he doesn't understand what he's feeling.
Because
Christians, you're not going to explain it to him.
Because Christians associate sexuality with grossness because you're not supposed to
feel it. I saw it all the time. These parents like, oh, my children were disturbed. I'm like, they're disturbed that you were in the room.
And then the flip side that I would love to, other picture I would like to paint is something that unfortunately is going to be completely useless to my friends who are still living in Judeo-Christian principles.
We lost Mark French and Joe Pruden. They're going off on politics and stuff. That's great. I'll jump in next
Welcome
week.
to our living room.
I can join that conversation later on.
So I was raised with a very ultimatum-based, black and white picture of human sexuality that included a lot of shame disguised as purity and holiness.
Right.
Shame and disgust disguised as purity and holiness.
If you're not feeling shame, you're not feeling right.
So I would love to, as part of our solutions part of this show, which we try to get into at the end, talk about what would a healthy bodily autonomy, sexuality positive mentality or what would that look like? And I know I was unable to discuss those things or accept those things until like after a decade of work.
Right.
A decade of struggling with the dissonance between what I was being taught and what I was seeing, or what I was being taught and what I was feeling, or what I was being taught and what in my heart of hearts, in my gut of guts, felt like the truth. And unfortunately, as I keep saying, Judeo-Christianity in the U.S. is largely an ultimatum-based religion.
Yes.
There's an answer for everything. There are Bible verses. The heart is deceitful above all else. Like, anytime that you think maybe you should trust your gut, we'd be rated and mocked, Disney and anyone else that ever used the phrase "follow your heart."
Right.
Definitely don't do what you feel like
That's
doing.
where the devil lives, you know.
It's really sad and hard.
Yeah, very sad and very hard.
Yeah. Mark says, having to dress in unitards to go swimming basically means you have to be around the most perverted, repressed weirdos on earth.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, this is so hard.
Agreed.
It's still so hard for me. I've been in the borderlands between going between my Judeo-Christian evangelical reformed upbringing and everything else for 5 years now. And it's still really hard when people say stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's still really hard when people are like, you had to wear super modest swimsuits because it was your job to keep everybody else from sinning.
You don't want to be the temptress.
Protect the weaker brother.
Protect the weaker brother. See, that's the responsibility of a woman, right? Not to tempt men, not to make them have evil thoughts. That whole premise is, I find troublesome.
I saw the best meme that I wanted to share. And I forgot to save it. I saved them to my phone, but then I used my phone to live stream, and so I can't access my memes during the show. But it was a lady on Twitter saying, my favorite Bible story was the one where Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. So, J-Lo is making me think sinful thoughts. Okay, pluck your eye out. You know, and he's like, wait, no, but it's J-Lo. It's like, no, if your hand causes you to stray, cut it off. I stayed up late masturbating because of the halftime show, and it's like, well, cut your hand off. I'm like, no, it's Shakira's fault. Right. And it's like, actually, Jesus said if your body is causing you to sin, police yourself.
Deal with it, right?
Yeah.
It's not
pretty much in the Bible.
It's not their problem.
I was like, oh my God, it's in the Bible.
Let's see how much irony we can harvest this show. So Joe Pruden and Mark French are going to go at it on Facebook until the end of time, I imagine, because I know that they both have very strongly held perspectives. And the whole
and they're
premise,
both pretty intelligent.
And the premise of the show was that I'd like us to actually agree that we're not probably going to actually have communication or agree. And this might just be an exercise in like
a demonstration,
intellectual sparring.
Right.
But I don't know if I would like to ask if either one of them think that they're going to change the other person's mind, or if this is just rooting for your team back and forth.
You can, as a human, get off on feeling like you made your point.
I totally do.
You can get off on feeling like you helped someone.
Oh, or you communicated, or you had an understanding between people. See, that's the.
I get off on feeling like we finally understand each other. Many people get off on feeling like they proved a point.
Right. Maybe that's just the thing. So
it's really not about.
Maybe that's the prescription. Yeah. If you can say, hey, the goal.
What is your goal?
Is to have stronger mutual understanding. Then that's a premise for a conversation.
Then that would change how you interact with each other.
Yeah, how do we start that?
Mark says, Great question. I know nothing. And Joe says, I've changed a lot of people's minds. I'm just that good. I definitely feel honored for the conversations that I've participated in where people have shifted their perspectives. Yes. I know it's hard. I know that it's embarrassing. We've been trained to feel like we have to have a rock solid, ultimatum based opinion or perspective in order to be strong, in order to be valuable,
right?
In order to be valuable. And so to say, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or oh, I guess I was wrong, or oh, you have a good perspective that I have never heard before. Those things we've been trained to think of those things as admitting weakness.
Conviction feels really nice. Like when you feel really convicted. I struggled with that word in my early 20s. I was like, I'm really convinced, like saying something convincing and then convincing somebody. And then I looked up the word convince, and it's related to convict, which is like you end up being convicted of these perspectives.
Imprisoned by your perspectives.
Yeah. Like when you have really strong convictions, that's a fundamentalist. Like that's the power of being fundamentalist.
You are a convict of your perspective.
You are a convict of your perspective, and there's no you're jailed by that perspective. So it feels good to have the border, to know where your walls are, and to argue within that. I love that feeling. But I also know that it's hard to go on a road trip when you're in that convicted area of one perspective. You're not going to necessarily get a lot out of the conversation. You may not have any communication. You just might be spouting some conviction.
So a friend of mine saw my posts today. I posted in my Facebook and Instagram stories letting people know we were going to do this show. It was about the halftime, why people are mad about it, and why other people are mad that someone's mad about the halftime show.
Right.
And then I posted some of my pretty wicked memes that I've collected about, like memes like moms for Maroon 5's halftime show where he was shirtless with an underwear band and a bunch of tattoos and muscles were like, yay! And moms for Shakira and J-Lo's halftime show were like, no! So it's these sorts of memes. Or like, the same conservatives that support a president who says horrible things about women and does horrible things to women.
Yeah.
Anyways, and I was like, hey, I need help from my friends on the other side. I haven't seen any memes pointing out the inconsistencies of the sex positive perspective. Like, where are the memes dissing the halftime show instead of supporting the halftime show? And one of my friends sent me a breakdown. It's not a meme, but it's a breakdown that her friend wrote, and I'm going to keep both their names on the hush-hush.
Sure.
About, she felt like, as a Christian, she really appreciated this other woman's breakdown of the halftime show. So I want to read that, and then we'll just use that as a launching point for more conversation.
Very good.
Because it's kind of hard, because I don't want to talk about, it's hard to stay focused, right? So this is this lady's pros. Like pro and con, her pros and her cons for the halftime show. Pros, both women were 40s and 50s, absolutely rocking it, looking and feeling amazing and owning their feminine energy. That's a huge win when they could have gone the 21-year-old bubblegum pop overnight sensation routine.
Okay.
So I'm not used to Christian women saying anything positive about women liking their own bodies.
Okay, yeah.
So to me, that's a win.
Right.
She also said there was cultural diversity, and they really embraced and embodied Latino dance music and culture. America can be very white bread, culturally speaking, so I love this element of diversity. This speaks to the style of dance and movement that is celebrated and cherished in Latino culture as beautiful and authentic. So again, as a Judeo-Christian influenced white Christian woman, she is appreciating something that a lot of white Christians don't think about, which is that there are a lot of people who aren't white in the US. A lot of folks in the comments about the halftime show were like, why do you show up at the American holiday of the Super Bowl with a Puerto Rican flag?
Yeah.
And it's like, one, Puerto Rico is part of the US. Two,
some people learned that this weekend.
Yeah. Anyway. And so then her cons, there was an unnecessary element of objectification of women. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, because we're not going to agree on objectification of women because our launch points for bodily autonomy and human sexuality are completely different.
Right. So there may not be the twains
Mm-mm.
may
The
not
twain
meet.
may not meet. Objectification of women that could have been avoided by saying no to ropes, groping, and sexual references that are just wildly inappropriate for kid viewers. Cons. Why couldn't two women just have danced for their own enjoyment and pleasure and agency without involving men to be the forced recipients of their sexiness? Why are we reinforcing the message that your sexiness is for men and not for you? Which is where it gets really hard to unpack.
All right.
And there are just layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers.
Right.
Let's see. Mark and Joe are still going at it.
Yeah.
Joe did step away from his conversation with Mark for a minute to say that diversity has gotten out of hand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Diversity has gotten out of hand.
I'm afraid I can't agree with you on that one, Joe. I feel like the various races that live in the U.S. are still completely underrepresented, even though we do have nice,
diversity.
Most commercials have people of an actual smattering of racial diversity, like representing the country. So cons. You brought up a good point earlier with the kiddie pageant shows.
Yeah.
The children that were on stage with J-Lo and Shakira were wearing age-appropriate clothing.
Yeah.
And doing age-appropriate versions of cultural dances.
Right.
I'd just like to point that out. Like, there are rites of passage for developing humans in other cultures.
Yeah.
Where you are a child and now you have become part of the adult sexual experience. Before you were a child, now you have become something else. Rites of passage.
Right.
We don't have those in the US.
Not so much.
It's just repression.
Yeah.
And then you guess get married and it'll just happen magically. But we do have in the US, what's going on out there? It's really distracting.
Nothing.
Okay. We do have in the US these
Somebody was driving badly and parking badly, and I was nervous, but it's fine.
Sexual exploitation of children. I think we should all cry about the get up in arms about children pageant shows, where they are wearing adult clothing and doing adult dances and exhibiting adult attitudes that are not necessarily coming naturally to them at 4.
Yeah, it's a freak show.
They've been trained to do things, and we think it's interesting because, oh, she's like a little tiny stripper. Like, it's horrible. It's so weird and different.
Well, that's the whataboutism thing often is like, so Joe Pruden does this whataboutism stuff where I said something, okay, so the kids were in cages in the border, and he's like, not true, that was under Obama. I'm like, doesn't matter who, doesn't matter. I didn't say that Trump put the kids in cages.
It doesn't matter who started it. They're still in cages
at the border
right now.
And it doesn't matter if it's Bush or, that's minor. That's a footnote as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I don't care who did it.
It doesn't matter who did it.
I care that there are still children dying on cement floors on U.S. soil.
That's a thing that needs, so, for her to bring that up in a dance, I'm like, well, there's a lot of things she could have talked about. That's important to her. She gave a nod. Maybe there would be a discussion over it. That's great.
Makes sense, because both women were Latina.
As far as I'm concerned, that's not a Trump-related thing, because it's not new. It's just gotten exacerbated because that dude likes to scare people.
Right.
Immigrants.
I know Trump didn't start the border camps at all. I am not a party loyalist. If you are part of my party and you do something that I think is incorrect, I will call you out just as fast as I will call out somebody in a different party. I'm not just going to like you or support you because you're in my party.
Well, that's what happens is like when you're on one team, everything is, if you say something that people disagree with, then they think you're talking about them. No, I'm not. I'm not talking.
There are children in cages.
That's the whole nuanced
on
perspective.
U.S. soil.
Nuanced perspective thing.
We should be mad about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who started it.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be there anymore.
We should not, there's solutions.
I think they would rather be in cages than in windowless padded rooms, says Joe. What does that mean?
I don't know. Whatever you gotta do to defend your team, I guess.
It's not even his team. Trump didn't start the border camps.
But he's being defensive, that's why he said, no, it was Obama, because that's a Trump, that's like, he's saying it's not Trump. And I didn't say it was Trump. That's my point.
Yeah, all right.
It's a biased perspective. And you find ways to defend things that, like Trump, I like watching people defend Trump because of the gymnastics that are required to defend this dirtbag. The guy is he's not a decent human. He's not somebody like there's a lot of like nefarious historical figures that I would totally hang out with because I figured they're even though they might be evil, they're I'm sure
Smart,
fascinating like
cunning,
twisted.
yeah.
Trump is not. I have no interest in meeting that guy whatsoever because he's a bore, as far as I'm concerned. He's a bore. He's boring, and that's why my friends in Oklahoma like him. People I went to high school with.
Jesus, what?
They like him because they're like they said anybody could be president. If that guy could be president, I could be president. They really like take care of him like the dumb little brother. And they defend the dumb little brother because it's family, because it's Klan, because it's Republican, because it's Christian. So they defend their little brother. They're not looking at him like a hero. I mean, they really defend him as like the weaker one in the Klan.
I suppose I can speak to that from a Christian perspective as well. I feel a little cringy because I know and love some of your friends in Oklahoma.
Yeah. I had one guy in mind that I wasn't.
It's hard for me. It's hard for me to say tough things about people. I just don't want anybody to feel badly. And it's hard to have productive conversations.
I think they would agree. I think they would agree with what I'm saying.
That Trump is boring?
I think Trump, well, what I mean, he's a bore. I don't think he's boring. He's great for ratings. He sells all kinds of chips. He's a train wreck. You can't look away from a train wreck.
Right.
What I'm saying is he's not a decent human. He doesn't
Not
demonstrate.
somebody you aspire to be or take home to visit your mom.
Would you want your sister to marry Donald Trump? I mean, let's ask that question. Would you want your sister to marry Donald Trump? Right? Like you don't want, but you still take care of him as I think they take care of him as like
a proxy.
As like the mentally retarded little brother or something.
Let me tell you.
Mentally handicapped kid. That's what it looks like to me. And they also like to say his name a lot because of the dead baby joke factor. Because it grosses out liberals.
So, from a Christian perspective, Christians have to support Trump because he's going to stop abortion and save babies. That's why they keep voting for him. That's why they support him, and that's why they try to make it. Christians support Trump because he says he's going to stop abortion and save babies.
I know that's the premise.
And
you can give it to him.
But it doesn't matter if he's doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
He's still going to save babies. That's the Christian perspective. Please let me finish my thought.
Yeah, doing it.
And so they also, I know many Christians who see Trump and want to support him and excuse his actions because he's a sinner just like me.
Yeah.
Is the feeling.
Yeah.
The feeling is he's a sinner just like me. He can get forgiven. He's a Christian. He asked for forgiveness and confessed his sins and became a born-again Christian. Now he's the president. He can get forgiven. I can get forgiven. Because Lord knows I think stuff like that. I have those sorts of temptations. I struggle with those kinds of things. Greed, sexual proclivities, those sorts of things. I struggle with them. He struggles with them. He's a born-again Christian. It's okay. I can make it too. We're all just struggling worms on the earth. Thank goodness Jesus came to save us.
Right. Yeah, I think that's mixed in with
I think it's a companion thought,
my
for sure.
pithy thought on it.
Yes. Kevin Olson says, Sally Rand did her fan dance entirely nude in the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. Today, they would not allow it, judging from the Super Bowl reaction.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, I'm going to use Kevin's comment to launch, I want to talk about when did sexual repression become the norm?
Yeah, that's the premise that they're working from.
Right, so Christians.
When did that drop in?
Yes, Judeo-Christians are saying that the halftime show is inappropriate.
We're really, the uncomfortableness with the human body is.
Right.
I think we can assign a lot of that to the old Judeo-Christian mindset. I think.
What do you mean by old? When did that happen? So unfortunately, we can't talk about this without talking about is it creationism or is it evolutionism?
Right.
Did humans evolve from monkeys? Are we animals? Are we a part of the animal kingdom? Do we operate off the same hormones, reactions, and drives that other animals do, or not?
Oh, right. That's the premise is that we're not like the other.
We are not animals. We are made specially in the image of God, and we have to be holy. He is holy.
That's a premise.
That's the premise, and so.
So then you are that helps divorce you from your body.
Yeah, if you
as an animal.
if you enjoy the halftime show, that's you being animalistic and therefore wrong, therefore bad, therefore unholy,
Yeah.
unsanctified, can't say unevolved, lol. So people watch the halftime show and they say, I'm all for women empowerment. Like, this is the best perspective that I've found in the Christian camps.
Okay.
This woman
Yeah.
that my friend shared with me. Why couldn't the two women just have danced for their own enjoyment and pleasure and agency without involving men to be the recipients of their sexiness? Which I is leaving out the lesbians, by the way.
Sometimes, yeah, because there's a lot of stuff going on. And when you're in the middle of the Super Bowl, you gotta make a big show because there's people like 150 yards away trying to see you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. It's a stage show. It's a stage show.
Right. That's not the problem. The problem is, like, why couldn't she just get up there and sing in a dress that was less revealing or something like that? The problem is this conversation of is human sexuality, I can't even say bad, because Christians wouldn't say it's bad either. They just say it should be private.
Should be private.
Your body is sacred to God, you and your partner, who you are married to forever.
Yeah, it's very burqa-like.
It's like invisible burqas.
I like that they make fun of burqas. Because they're doing, like the Christians.
No, they don't. My mom lauded burqas all the time.
Really?
Yes.
Well, it's just because the team thing. Muslims are bad, therefore burqas are bad.
I'm sure there's a kind of Christian that does that. But
yeah,
no,
there's quite a few.
In Reformed evangelical circles, there were many conversations about
maybe we should have burqas.
There were special clothing lines. Mormons have special clothing lines.
Yeah, magic underwear.
Where the collar goes up far enough, the sleeves go down far enough. Yeah. There's not going to be any risk of midriff showing. It goes way below your knees, no matter what it is.
So when did we get so prude? Maybe we'll put that. That's a question I think we should ask our audience. There may be people out there that have more information than we do. When did we become a sexually repressed culture?
And
we're more sexually repressed than a lot of other.
Pretty much the rest of the planet.
The rest of the planet. Yeah.
Like, there are other cultures where people are expressive, and the children's shows show real bodies, and like, I guess the question would be, does that sort of behavior create rape culture?
Yes.
Because what?
I'm going to say yes.
Wait, what are you saying? Sexual expression and bodily autonomy creates rape culture?
No, our repressive body shame culture creates rape culture. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
Right, because all the Christians and people influenced by Judeo-Christian principles say that sexual expression is what creates rape culture. How can women expect to be safe on the streets when they do things like wear immodest swimsuits?
What?
How can women expect to be safe when they do things like wear immodest swimsuits? They're giving men exactly what they want and encouraging. And I mean, this is me. I'm channeling a perspective.
Going back and forth.
I'm channeling a perspective. Yeah. Going back and forth. Because in my mind right now, what I want to say is, because my body is my body, and what I do with my body has nothing to do with what you are allowed to do with your body, and it all comes down to consent and bodily autonomy.
Right.
You are not allowed to do things to my body without my permission. It doesn't matter what or when.
Agreed.
And so that's the thing that we should be policing and fixing. Because, and here's the parenthetical thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, because people are like, well, why can't women just not be, slutty? And like the parenthetical thing.
Slutty.
Yeah, that's the perspective. If women want to be treated with respect, they should act respectfully.
And there's the premise of respect.
The premise is, exactly, the parenthetical is that humans should be able to fully express themselves sexually and with their own bodies whenever they want to, as long as they are not doing something without someone else's consent. Like, that should be the bottom line, except that people have gotten into this mentality of repression, where you being, like, dressing in a way that you find to be attractive for yourself causes me to think things, and then I feel like it's unfair in some way. Or I feel like you've made me stumble in some way.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's answered that question, if they know when we got so repressed. I don't know where it started. I know that the whole world that I've lived in this country, like my entire life has been in a sexually repressed era. My whole life has been that way. It's like
what you call sexual repression, some people call sexual holiness.
Yeah, sure.
I'm serious, like thousands of people in the country.
Yeah, I know.
Wouldn't call it repression, they would call it being correct.
They would also call people who are
Are you about to whataboutism?
No, I'm going to say that cultures where the nipple is free,
right,
where that's not an issue.
Aboriginal tribes.
If somebody's walking, not even Aboriginal. I mean, if you're like, so in Germany, public parks, you can just go nude sunbathe if you want.
You mean as a woman? Because men can always nude sunbathe.
Yeah, women.
Topless.
Right.
Men
but
can
in
always
Germany,
go topless.
they don't care. So
right.
at one point, they're like, we're not going to be that.
Right.
And so when you walk through the park and you see a bunch of naked people, it's not a big deal.
Right.
You're not drawn to it because it's an anomaly in your environment.
Oh my goodness, bodies.
We don't have that here, and so when something is outside of the norm, people freak out. So the freak out
They don't know how to react.
The freak out is the problem, not that we have human bodies and sometimes we have clothes on and don't. I mean, it seems really juvenile.
What seems juvenile?
Our repression around the human body. It's unhealthy.
Yes.
Physically and mentally, I think. And but it's accepted as a premise. But that's just here.
In the U.S.
And people like to talk about it in the U.S. Yeah, people like to talk about it like it's some
like
biblical thing that we should. I don't know. I think it's just. It boils down to moms with flat butts were upset that somebody who was older than them had nice butts. I think is really what it comes down. That's where the outrage is.
I pondered that perspective as well. I think, unfortunately, knowing what it was like for me to realize the thoughts that I was thinking were actually a layer added on top of my real thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
I had to, over the period of the last 5 years, and still today, I have to do this actively sometimes, chip away what I think is my thought to reveal my actual thought underneath. Judeo-Christianity does this to people.
Right, because you can't trust yourself. You can't trust your thoughts. So you have to start putting it through the meat grinder of Christianity to figure out if it's right or wrong or good or bad.
Everything is colored by the correct biblical version of the thought. And so to even have a conversation with someone who's operating out of Judeo-Christian principles about bodily autonomy or sex positivity, they're going to say things like, I thought it was gross. And they think that that is their thought, when what their actual reaction was, that was arousing. But they don't know how to use that thought. They think that that thought is bad, and they're not allowed to act on it anyway. So they cover that thought up with, the halftime show was gross.
You want to destroy what you can't have often.
Yeah.
Because
and there's just constant denial and self-gaslighting so that you stay within the ultimatum of the biblical bubble.
Right.
Kevin says the modern religious right began growing in the 1920s and in the 1930s with the tent revivals. It grew among the unemployed poor during the Depression. I'm actually really, really curious to start researching because I remember reading stories of like the 1800s. I was telling you earlier, like the Wild West and the Oregon Trail. People took Bibles with them and would sometimes read it. But I also know that like in the time of the Titanic and stuff, like you can't show your ankle. I remember my mother was lamenting the days when ankles were considered immodest. And can't we go back there? Like we watched Far and Away with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, where like they run away from Ireland to go and buy some property in Dakota or something. And she shows her ankle on the steamer ship, and it's just shocking, and all of the men can't look away.
Scandalous.
And my mother's like, if only we could go back to that day where the body was so respected and protected.
I have compassion for your mom.
Mark French says, to stay in line and strictly to the show, my only definitive opinion is sex is hot when it's hot, and it's not when it's not. And if you're judging anyone at any time, creating a feeling of sexiness regardless of its incarnation, you're a weirdo.
So the moms that were upset because the children saw it, I would say, yeah, the premise that that's bad for them is a built-in
hardcore
cultural snafu.
Yeah. We can't even talk about whether or not it was bad for the children because the Bible says the current interpretations of the Bible. I'm actually starting a Bible study with my 10-year-old sister.
Oh, jeez.
She was asking me, so
she's trying to make sense of it.
The good news is my parents don't ever listen to my radio show, so I can say this stuff on air and they won't know.
Yeah, right.
But they're out of town for a week, and so like they left the house and she started texting me. And so we're gonna have a phone call every day, and we're going to go through the Gospels and only read Jesus's words.
Oh.
And we're gonna read it in like 3 different Bible versions, so like New King James.
Because that's the world she's in.
Yes. And she was like, you don't really like. But I know you said you're post-Christian. She was missing me, and she looked me up on Twitter to see what I like pictures. She was hoping to see pictures of me because she missed me. And I was like, oh. So
and she saw
post-Christian on my Twitter bio, and she's like, but you don't really like think we evolved from monkeys, right? I was like, well, actually, I'm honestly really still struggling with that one.
Actually, it's the stoned ape theory that the monkeys evolved upon mushrooms.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
not putting that in text on my sister's phone.
It's more nuanced than you might imagine.
Mark says it was Quakers and Lutherans totally cool with mass murdering natives and burning women alive, but not cool with masturbating. It's a ridiculous premise. Astrid says, hey, from Sweden. Sweden. In Scandinavia, we see the American view on bodies as a one-way view, always a sexual perspective, even on children.
Yeah.
We have a body.
Yeah.
We have a second one when a naked body is just a body.
So I would say
maybe it comes from our sauna culture.
Perhaps from her perspective, all the hoopla around the Super Bowl by the moms, that itself would seem perverted.
Yes.
Right? So this is the lack of irony in the fundamentalist mindset. This is a big premise.
Lack of nuance.
And lack of irony. So it's like the religions who are like, you must not do evil, and then, mass murder indigenous people, right? Like, that's ironic that you're not supposed to do bad things, but you're destroying entire peoples.
Right.
That's ironic, right? So the idea of like, you better cover up so you don't have sexual thoughts causes everybody to have sexual thoughts all the time because of the cover up.
Right.
That's ironic. And they don't get irony. That's the problem. That's what. And when I say they, I mean fundamentalist, orthodox perspectives. There's not a lot of room for irony in that perspective. It's not something that gets added into the soup. So, I was saying earlier, like, once you tell somebody to beware of the devil, now they have something to be afraid of that they didn't necessarily have to be afraid of before. They didn't have some evil thing tempting them before.
Right.
Until the premise of the devil was introduced to them. That's ironic. You should be afraid of what? Oh, this thing over here, you never heard of it? Now they have something to be afraid of.
That's a very interesting proposal.
It's very ironic. The lack of irony is that. So when these people are upset about, sexuality, that's kinky. They're being kinky. They're being perverted.
Astrid says, don't think about a black cat.
Yes.
It's that kind of exercise.
Exactly. And that's all they're doing. They're making an issue that really shouldn't be an issue. And the Super Bowl stuff has to be pushed. Like, so they get up there and they wear some highly engineered gear that gets them just within the law of being nude or not nude. That,
for American television rules.
For American television rules. That's what an artist is supposed to do.
Push the boundaries.
Where is the edge? I'll get right up on it, and then maybe I'll show my nipple. But it's not my nipple because I have a nipple ring, and so it's kind of like a pasty,
right.
I don't know. Like, so you just push it, and you push it, and you push it.
To make people think.
That's what an artist is supposed to do. Okay. So rather than saying that's just a pop star, I would say that's an artistic statement, because what is the perversion of our culture around repression and human sexuality and the human body was activated by an artist pushing the envelope of the edge.
They liked it, and they knew they weren't supposed to like it, and so they interpret it as disgust or disappointment.
Yeah, that's what happens when you can't trust yourself.
And also when you're not supposed to like sexy things. Like at the baseline, Christians aren't supposed to like sexy things.
So that's the irony, is the people who are most outraged by the Super Bowl show are probably the most perverted among us.
That's a broad
And when I say
statement.
when I say perverted, I mean perverted from our nature.
Okay, all right, that's a good thing to clarify because Christians use the word perversion to describe things like this halftime show.
Like being natural, like being perverted, like masturbating could be considered perverted in some.
It is considered perversion by most
so that's
people
a
in the
perversion.
US.
I would say that perspective is a perversion of human nature.
Okay, so this is the solutions part that I was hoping to get into, which is going to be some really, maybe potentially shocking statements.
Okay, good. From you?
Well, maybe both of us, because I'm kind of new to the whole thing.
Okay.
But like,
you try to be provocative. Go for
human sexuality.
Yes, heard of it.
We all have it.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
All humans have a kind of sexuality.
Okay. Even if it's not much fun.
Even if it's a kind of sexuality that only likes cuddling.
Okay, very good.
And humans should be able to be that way, right?
Yes.
It's natural.
I'll say yes.
Natural human sexuality is natural, and natural is not bad. I have to make that qualifier because Christians say that natural is bad.
Yeah, they're at war with nature.
Right, at war with nature, sin nature. They combine it into one term. Sin nature.
Nature and nature is it's all something that's tempting them, right?
Right.
The natural way is at odds with their
because of biblical statements
Christian
and interpretations of biblical statements.
Right.
Natural desires and natural actions are wrong. And so that means, gosh, you try.
I know a lot of Christians that are not perverted sexually in the way that I was saying. I know a lot of people who are Christian and they're not hung up.
Yeah.
They're not hung up about their sex. They're not hung up about their bodies. You can be
or
Christian and not be hung up. So we are talking about
a particular kind.
A very particular kind, which is whether you you own that or don't own that, or even whether you're Christian or not Christian, it has
influenced you,
permeated our culture to a degree that you may hold Judeo-Christian perspectives without knowing.
Yes.
So you think, I'm a very liberal Christian, and then you're still holding these things, like the irony around she should respect herself more than to do that.
Right.
Said by a woman who believes that she is the secondary human to the first, which is males. Males are primary, females are wives and brothers of children. And helpers, and not equal.
Well, I mean, if we're going to get into like glorification in biblical marriage roles, like that's just a mixed bag of self-gaslighting and Stockholm syndrome.
Yes.
Like, having been there, done that,
yeah.
I received a whole bunch of validation from myself and from my entire community for being a good wife.
Yeah.
And I still struggle today with feeling like I'm a good partner if I don't clean the bathroom every week.
Can we talk about that next week? Or in the future? I want to talk about that perspective of like, because I think there's a Christian perspective about women's roles and men's roles.
Okay.
And then there is a secular perspective that feels like that is incorrect.
Okay.
And throws the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Because men and women do have certain differences.
Yeah.
And to say that we are totally equal, sometimes I think is, some people have said is disrespectful to women because women are way superior to us in certain ways, in certain aspects. So I think the idea of equality is a way to sort of get out of like this Christian chattel ownership perspective. And in the middle is this equality, but I think we have to take it further. We have to actually recognize our differences. Just like I recognize that the fundamentalist mindset is useful in the world.
We need teammates.
You don't just make everybody not fundamentalist. I don't think that's the way it works. I think it's having an appreciation for that mindset, because I feel like, when I was of a fundamentalist perspective, I just wanted to help. I wanted to be on the team, and I wanted to feel like I did something good for the team.
Yep.
And that's so nice to feel that way. Whether you're defending it intellectually or whether you're doing some good deed or whatever the thing is, that desire to be helpful and useful and a part of is so strong. And I think that's part of the human nature.
Yes.
And it gets perverted to this sort of Christian perspective.
Yes.
So that you end up becoming a slave to people who utilize your fundamentalist perspective and put you in they convict you.
Like my conversation with my liberal feminist friend and my conservative Christian friends this week about the HalfTime show on Facebook. She couldn't understand why I wasn't shutting them down for trampling all over her rights as a woman. And it's because I know those men and I have had conversations with them and I know that they're speaking from a place of love. Their love has been taken by modern interpretations of biblical sexuality and diverted down a particular path. But they are loving men, and they think that what they're doing is being loving and respectful of women by trying to encourage them to protect themselves and respect themselves.
Right.
And when you are outside of the Christian bubble or have been outside of it for a long time, you just think they're all jerks for trampling on people's rights.
That's what it's interesting to see how that changes. When your mind changes, then that's why a lot of people get out of fundamentalism and they get mad, like I did. They get mad at the people who are still stuck on it because it seems dumb. Once you're out.
Or you get mad at them because they hurt you.
What?
You get mad at the people you
right.
They hurt
You get mad at them because they were your captors.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Astrid wants to know, does this fight against nature? Oh, thanks, Mark. He said we were bad A.
Yay.
Great show. Does this fight against nature? Hey, Mark, come on up to the Carpenters Union Hall tonight at 7. We're having our DJ social.
Oh, that's happening.
Free food, chatting about the station, friends and family. Sometimes there's live music. Any of y'all that are in Butte are welcome to attend. It's on Granite Street across from the courthouse after 7. Astrid says, does this fight against nature and heritage from the new social class bourgeois during Victorian times where the purpose was to separate themselves from the farmers who were seen as natural and not as cultural?
Right.
That's interesting. That could be, because I really am wondering, when did we separate ourselves from our natural physicality and put that away as something that needed to be policed and watched over and guarded?
Right.
And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, my dad was that kind of
social
Christian.
Class.
My dad was that kind of Christian. He always, for him, having hands as soft as a baby's bottom was a sign of his class.
Because he didn't have to work with his hands.
Because people who have rough hands are lower people, basically, and that's where it's coming from. That's a good point. Thank you, Astrid.
That's so great. That gives us an even further back launching point for research than the 1920s and 30s revivals.
Yeah.
Victorian era. So as society evolved, we were also talking earlier today about the cycle of dogmatism. Spirituality happens. People start making rules around the spirituality. Then you have dogma. Then you have to break away and start with a new spirituality. And that cycle happens over and over again in human experience. But I think this is really interesting that it seems like humans evolve to a certain point where, Tammy, we're talking about the HalfTime show, why people are angry about it, and why other people are angry that someone's angry about the sex and HalfTime show.
We're talking about sexual repression in America.
Sexual repression in the U.S., disguised as protecting women and children. And we only have 2 minutes left before Dan and Patty come in and take over for the Sunday Smackdown.
Right, I have a song.
That's great.
It's
Let me finish Astrid's thing.
Yeah, do it.
Following that, the woman was nature and the man was culture, which I think plays back into what you were saying earlier, that women are by nature, LOL, more connected to nature. We have the periods, we birth the babies, we are literally entrenched in the cycles of life, whether we want to be or not.
Right.
As humans evolved from hunter-gatherer to farmers to cities to intellectual evolution, we had the time and the luxury to actually start studying things. I can imagine that someone got prideful and was like, I must be better than the laborers because I work with my mind and not my hands.
Right, sure.
Those carnal things. And then they just started associating all the carnal things with negativity.
Kinky.
Tammy says she's so angry. Oh, Oh, guys, this has been really wonderful.
Yeah.
We're so grateful to everybody that participated.
I don't have a good split attention span, so I'm going to go back through our little feed here and see if I can pipe in over the week or so.
Yeah.
The dialogue can continue after the show ends.
We'll also be broadcasting further on Twitch throughout the week with conversations that we can't have on the radio. There are certain rules.
So if you have commented on this show, then if we decide to do a follow-up show during the week, we will post a comment, you will be alerted, and you can join us further down the rabbit hole.
That's right. Because we are still slightly anxious about what people might tune in and think, sort of like families who suddenly were beset with J-Lo.
Yes.
But the fight is always against women, Astrid says.
Yeah.
Now I just want to study like matriarchal religions.
Oh, you're going to become
I'm going to go way down that rabbit hole.
All right. Well, we'll be talking about something controversial next week.
Oh, Tammy, I'm sorry you missed it too, but the good news is the
all
show
online.
is archived on KBMF website, and it's also archived on our Facebook page forever, and you can see the chat streams.
And YouTube now?
Yeah, and now it's on YouTube
What's
too.
our YouTube channel?
It's Dark 78 Enterprise right now because
Okay,
I haven't
very
done any of the modifications yet.
Very good.
What song are we gonna play for Daniel and Patty on the way out?
Let's see if this thing works. It's on
we're
the
playing it off your
auxiliary.
computer?
Yeah, we'll play it off the computer. We're just going to do a nice DJ Shadow ambient.
Ooh, lovely.
Mountain will fall.
Hmm.
How's that?
I love it. Thanks so much, Dark 78. There's
Oh,
something.
there's Yeah.
Yep. Oh, Tammy, go back through, start at the beginning, the video will upload, and then in like half hour you can start at the beginning and comment live with the chats, so your chats will be immortalized with everybody else's.
I think I got rid of it, but it's...
That's lovely. Hey guys, we really appreciate you being a part of the Post-Orthodoxy family. We'll be back next week.
Sunday Smackdown is up next.
Stay tuned for Dan and Patty.
Ah.
It's still on. Somewhere.
How to do it.
Just letting you know.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Why did it stop? Why did it stop?
One of your
You
tabs.
unplugged me. I got it now. It's done.
Okay. Woo! Hey Dan.
How's it going?
Pretty good, how are you?
We're still set.
Oh, we
he's
were
on
both
with his doggy
working.